All right, we are now officially live and let me sync up the sound. There we go. Welcome to another edition of the Friday Farcast. As you know, this is when I do a lot less talking and a lot more listening. One of my favorite activities of the week is to bring people on and share different ideas, perspectives, point of view, etc. And today's guest is Bruce McDonald, who you're going to meet shortly. And there's been a lot of enthusiasm about having Bruce appear on the show. And I think the timing is everything. And here we are, post 9/9, 9/10, 9/11. We're living in a different universe in many ways. And I thought that having Bruce on the show specifically for this Friday would give us some interesting insights, both from his life, his work, his world, and what kind of alchemical brew that we can cook here for the next couple of hours, because the world is rapidly changing and you're living in historical times, whether you understand and believe it or not. And in many ways, unlike anything we've ever seen based on the history that we do know. So before we bring Bruce on, let me just talk a little bit about True Hemp Science. And True Hemp Science is, of course, the sponsor of this show. And all you got to do is go to truehempscience.com, check out all of their offerings. It's the best CBD you will find on the internet. You could ask some people in chat who have become a regular customer of Chris and his exquisite blends of CBD, THC, CGA. He does an amazing job. So go there, you spend $100, type in 15MINS, and you will get the goodie bag that comes along with your order. So it's like waking up and having a little Christmas stocking in your order. It's the Whitman sampler of your order, and everybody looks forward to that. And of course, by supporting Chris and his business based out of Austin, and he sources everything here in this country. It's all organic. Right? You support him, you support the show, you support your body. It is the circle of life. So if you spend $150 or more, you get free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. So big shout out to Chris and True Hemp Science. All right, let's waste no more time and bring on the man himself, Mr. Bruce McDonald. I'm going to read his bio in a second here. Hi, Bruce.
Hi, Robert.
So happy you're here. Thanks for making time to share with us, hang out with us today.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I went to your Substack page, and I put it in the bio here, or the show description. So I want to read that and then go over some of the titles of your books and jump in and maybe start from the literary angle and learn more about you and your story and go from there. Yeah.
I just noticed the other day you referenced the Second Coming by Yeats.
Yes. I played that. That was sort of the anchor for my show yesterday.
Yeah. Great poem.
It's one of the most amazing poems, and I think important poems. And clearly of the 20th century. Throw the Wasteland in there by Pound and a few others. We're there, man. We're there. We are at Yeats's Second Coming. And you know what's really interesting? He talks about the falcon cannot hear the falconer.
Yeah.
Right. And who do we have that is in the midst of all of this noise? It's RFK Jr., who is a falconer.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what he does. He works with birds of prey. And he was, whatever you think of Maha or RFK and his background, what he's trying to do, when he was in the throes of that chaos in DC with the various senators and representatives, it was like there was no discussion, there was no dialogue. It was just shouting, noise, and chaos. And so literally Kennedy the falconer cannot hear the falcon.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like a major event. And not just major in the sense that, well, it begins to reflect Yeats' Second Coming, what it does is it shows how many people are willing to sell their souls for nickels on the dollar. And
100%.
yep. So what we saw was a revelation. That was a
Yeah.
revelation. If people couldn't figure that out, you're gonna have to go back and sort of revisit that. So let me read your bio here. I want to get into your bio, and I want to read it straight off of the description of the show. So give me 1 second, and we'll get into the titles of your books and everything that goes along with that. So let me get in here and do this. Let me go to my page right here. All right. Give it to this. Let me stop that. And let me just read this here. This is from his own words from his Substack, the Telemanca Review. Bruce McDonald juggles the themes of economics, love, religion, spirituality, and self-delusion with balance, dexterity, and mastery of an old hand from Cirque du Soleil. Did you actually work for Cirque du Soleil?
No.
Because you're a Canadian. Had to ask
Yeah,
it. Smart,
Yeah.
funny, and profoundly seditious. God as an economist is an exhilarating and satiric tour de force, an eloquent, insightful, and contemporary novel that counterpoints iconoclastic acerbic wit with honest compassion and seduces with its compelling and provocative characters, scathing societal critique, and a playfully applied sense of mysticism. God as an economist recounts the impudent odyssey of William Taube, an Ottawa-born economics grad who moves to Toronto and falls under the spell of the recently paroled Randall Cobb Seymour. We have our own version of Randall Cobb, Randall Tex Cobb. The Cobb is a vengefully shrewd and charismatic native Canadian, part Mohawk, part Ojibwe, the embodiment of the trickster and a powerfully animated personality of cunning, gall, and uninhibited entrepreneurial instincts. He is hell-bent on beating the white man at his own dirty game, and in so doing, he masters what he calls the Queen's economy. Good-hearted Will not only becomes involved in cop scams, but finds himself swept up in his own evolving urban vision quest. So you can find out all about that and more at Bruce's Substack, which is listed right here. And I got a few titles of Bruce's books that I want to just name call here before we go into everything, to give you kind of an example of somebody who's done a lot of work. God as the Economist, The Stolen Child, The Russian Princess Case, The Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story, The Light of Darkness, A Warrior's Tale for Its Time, The Devil and Us, A Memoir of You and Me, The Galactic Historian, The World According to Andrew Bartzis. So there you go. Those are the titles of somebody who is deeply steeped in the literary tradition. And I think I'm gonna have a blast here going into that world with you. So let's start with the writing thing. How and when, where did you first figure out that this is what you wanted to do? And at what point did you commit pen to paper or index fingers, phalanges to typewriter? How did all that start? When did it happen? Take us back, Bruce.
So I first started writing because my first meditation instructor at 17 years old told me to keep a dream and meditation journal. Mm-hmm. And so I started writing on the daily. And then around 20, I met my first girlfriend, and she came from a very literate family. Both of the parents were doctors. And I started to experience poetry. Now, a lot of people think poetry is just geekville and a total waste of time. But I did too in the beginning. But sooner or later, a poet or a couple of poets are going to connect with you. And the ones that I just went absolutely apeshit about were Ted Hughes, the British poet laureate, husband of Sylvia Plath to some, and Wallace Stevens, the American insurance executive.
Man, I was going to name drop Wallace Stevens at some point, because Sunday Morning might be my favorite poem of all time.
Oh, unbelievable. Now, if you were to be riding the subways in Toronto in 1986 or 87, you'd see a young Bruce MacDonald on the subway reading the collected works of Wallace Stevens.
Yeah.
And then from there, I just went out, and my first love was poetry. And then I read novels, and I was really attracted to what I would call the esoteric writers, Herman Hesse. I did the whole beat phase, Dharma Bums, On the Road, Kerouac, Ginsberg, the other crazy heroin Burroughs. I actually met William S. Burroughs in 1988 at Convocation Hall, University of Toronto. And then I just kept reading, and I'm still an avid reader. I have to do it all on iPad now because Amazon delivery charges are outrageous in the jungle.
Yeah.
And my favorite novelist, hands down, is Cormac McCarthy. So yeah, and then I have a journalism degree, and I got a journalism degree knowing I wanted to be a writer. And rather than study English, I was motivated by what Hemingway said. He said, study journalism. They'll teach you to write a declarative sentence.
That's so true, because I was an English major.
Yeah.
And
no offense. No offense.
No, it's okay. It's all right. I mean, I didn't start off as an English major. I started off doing basically television broadcasting. And I did that for about 2.5 years. I had a major kind of falling out with the medium at a certain point, and sort of turned my back on it. And I didn't know what I wanted to study, but I started hanging out with this really eccentric woman in San Francisco. Her name was Dortha, and she was probably the most interesting person I'd ever met in my life. And she had a way of navigating through the literary world that to me was fascinating. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be an English major now. And it has its upside and its downside. The upside is I got really, really good at writing essays, which I was never very good at. The downside is it felt like, to me, it was eating away at my imagination, because you always have to sort of have this deconstructive, critical view. So I developed that really, really well. But the more poetic side, imaginal side, I think suffers if you decide to become an English major. So I think Hemingway was right. I didn't want to be a creative writing major because a lot of the creative writing people felt kind of lightweight to me. The heavyweights were in the English department, by the way. And I got an amazing education for on the cheap at San Francisco State. And Anne Rice had just left there. She went on to become a big star, obviously. And then Frances Mays, she was teaching there. She went on to teach right under the Tuscan sun. Stan Rice, Anne's husband, he was there. And Leonard Woolf, who is the father of, what's her name, the sort of feminist, Naomi Wolf, her father taught there. So it was a really, really good department. And I learned a lot. And I also got very soured on academia as well. Because I saw that there was a very narrow sort of bandwidth, and sort of the new school of criticism was coming in, which I thought was completely insane, by the way. Yeah. And it's like, you're going to ask me to read the cantos by Pound, and you're telling me I should know nothing about the guy's life. Yeah. Understand what he's writing about. Yeah. I mean, talk about disconnected. Are you there with me on that?
100%. I went through a huge Pound phase. Huge Eliot phase, huge modernist phase. That one lasted 3 or 4 years. That was most of my 20s. I didn't hit McCarthy till I was in my 30s, but I did a deep dive on Pound. And not only a poet, I think he was the preeminent symbologist, or what is the name? Semiotics mind of the early 20th century. He decoded everything.
He had audacity, right? He's like, let me take on the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know Chinese, well, let me take on the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also speak Mandarin. I lived in Taiwan, and it's faded quite a bit now, but I still dazzle the keepers in Costa Rica once in a while. So I have that in common with Pound as well. I've also been a voracious reader of scripture, mystical biography of saints. It's really obscene, the list of books I've read. I mean, probably as much or more than most tenured professors in a comparative religion department, because I always found scripture to be the ultimate poetry, and a poetry that was unashamed to say that essentially, when you're reading it correctly, what Stevens figured out, which is that the imagination is real when you use it properly.
Right.
And so I went through all the Chinese stuff when I lived in Taiwan. And I would have my jiajiaos, my private students. These would be corporate executives. And in the Chinese tradition, the Confucian tradition, you're supposed to honor the teacher. And they would say, what can we do for you here while you're in Taiwan? What do you need? I said, and I would make a list and I'd say, get me the best English translations of these books. And they'd read the list and go, who the hell is this guy? And then I had no TV or radio, because when I was in Taiwan, it was pre-internet. I was there 92 to 94. So every writer will have these, I call them the incubation years, where all they do is read. And that was Taiwan for me. And I read most of the Chinese classics, the Three Kingdoms. I familiarized myself completely with Li Bai, probably their most famous poet. By the way, Chinese poetry is considered the best in the world. Most English speakers balk when they hear that. But when you understand that every word in Chinese has 4 tones, you start to understand the musicality that they can get into in their poetry. And so while I was in Taiwan too, I also studied with an esoteric Buddhist master who was also a rotating professor of microwave physics at Princeton, spoke fluent English. And then I also studied with a very revered master of Northern style of Tai Chi Chuan and Taoism. I actually was going to do a book with him, with a photographer from San Francisco. So the mystical and the literary have always been first cousins for me. And you probably won't be alarmed when I say this. It's one of the reasons I find modern literature almost complete garbage, with the exception of McCarthy. And I mean all of it. I mean, I literally wanted to burn Infinite Jest when I finished it. And that was a turning point for me. And I hope you don't love that book.
I'm not invested in David Foster Wallace at all.
Yeah, when that book came out, and the reaction he got from the literati, I just said, this is the official death of literature, if this is what they're calling literature now. Other than McCarthy, I think the last really good book I read was maybe American Pastoral by Philip Roth.
Interesting.
So now I just cycle through the classics, and I'm rereading all my Dostoevsky now, and rereading all my McCarthy. I try to get 2 to 4 hours of reading in a day.
Dostoevsky was a master, brilliant writer.
Oh yeah, absolutely unbelievable.
It seems like there's a theme that runs across all media, and we'll call this media print media, that everything has become a degraded copy of itself, whether it's books, movies, and I have some ideas about why the movie part has become degraded. Music, there's nothing new or interesting or soulful or meaningful happening in any of those. And most people are looking back now. They're going back into the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, even further back, into other centuries, because the well is run dry, or seemingly so. Now, I think that the new medium is what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
This is the new medium. This is the new jam, the new technique, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I think it's valid in its own way, but it's different. I know, and I think we're too close to it right now to be able to quantify its impact
Yeah.
on each of us. Like even how you got here to this show is a
Yeah.
byproduct of this whole process.
Yeah.
So there are some interesting things happening, but they're not happening in the places that we used to look.
Yes. Yeah. So the last 4 books I've written, I actually coined my own term to describe the books I write now, beginning with Stardust Ranch. I call it metafiction. So it's nonfiction that is so outrageous it goes beyond fiction. Anything like even Haruki Murakami, it just goes beyond. And I deliberately sought these topics out, and I deliberately wanted to bring these people forward. And they were all universally positive experiences, with the exception of the Galactic Historian, but that's a whole other story. Maybe we shouldn't get into it. And I started to find that the muses became quite literal in these books, very different than creative writing. Now, between the creative writing and the meditation, you start to figure out what the muse is with every book. And then you look at your life and you realize that everything has been guided. You know, I don't mean to sound like I'm falling into that Eastern nihilism, you know, where everything's an illusion and your fate, but there is some truth to it. And every book I've ever written has had a profound muse or group of muses associated with it. And the muses are not what we think. They can be angelic, they can be demonic, they can be extraterrestrial, they can be a collective hive consciousness on the 4th or 5th dimension. And that's been a very interesting part. And I can do it with other writers now too. I can tune into the book and find out what influenced them.
Right.
And that's been a very interesting unfoldment. Storytelling will never go away. AI will never be able to tell stories. AI can't feel. And until you can feel, you can't really tell a story, because it comes from the intelligence of feeling. And when I did take English literature courses, in the course of getting my journalism degree, and the conclusion I walked away with was they convert beauty to analysis. They
Exactly.
Yeah. And then, so, you know, do you ever see a movie called Barcelona? I forget the director. He was in the late 90s.
Yeah, I know the movie, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, it was just, they have these 2 guys talking at a cocktail party, and one of the guys, they're talking about literature, and the guy says, "Oh, I'm very well read." The one guy says to the other, "You're extremely well read. How do you find the time to read all these books?" He says, "Oh, I've never read those books. I just read criticism."
Right. And there are people that do that. I mean,
yeah,
it's like the Cliff Notes, but of course you're reading it through their lens. There's a guy who wrote this book years ago, like in the 90s. He African, but born and raised in England. His name is Kojo Eshin, Kodwo Eshin, Eshun. And he wrote this book called Nothing Like the Sun. And he termed what he did, or how his literary style was, sonic fiction. And it's all about the exploration of the sort of the science fiction, futurist model in Black music. And the way that this guy wrote was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, so does it sound like metafiction to me? I don't know. It's his own version of it. I'd have to like only read like, I don't know, 10 pages at a time, because everything was so dense. The ideas were so compacted, but not in a way that made it feel claustrophobic. It was like, what did I just read?
Yeah.
Like, this is really like a sentence. One sentence could just take you somewhere.
Yeah. And
And
I don't know the book, but I just looked him up. And every time you find something extraordinary coming out of Africa, it's 9 times out of 10, it's Ghana. They're the tip of the spear for the African Renaissance, and very interesting country, Ghana, and also the location that a lot of Western blacks are repatriating to if they want to leave Western
Actually
culture.
setting up like almost like tract homes in some ways, right? But
Yeah.
but with some intention and thoughtfulness behind the whole thing. Like really, really interesting. Yeah, that book, if you can find it, I think you'll pay about $350, or it's on Roulette Press.
I'm going to try and find
an
EPUB if I can, because I can only read on the iPad now.
Well, if you can grab that, you will be vastly entertained because of his use of the written word and his incredibly deep knowledge of Black music as a future-oriented medium. He gets into Parliament, Funkadelic. He gets into the Detroit techno scene and Jeff Mills and Rings of Saturn. Like really, really interesting stuff. Wow. I met the guy. He was a super cool guy.
Yeah.
So your style, and again, I apologize for being late to your literary party, but your style, to me, in some ways, if I could find an American counterpart, this is a guy who I think is underrated as a writer, is Robert Anton Wilson. Because Wilson is somebody who does take bits and pieces from his own life and goes into like the high strange of, the Illuminati and Eris and Discord. And I used to cross this path every now and then in Berkeley, where I used to live. He was hanging out with one of his boy toys at a Christmas concert, one of these radio stations put together. So yeah, we've crossed some interesting paths. So when did you say, okay, first book, here I go, I'm in? When did that switch turn for you? And what was it like to see your first work published?
So I started writing seriously around the journaling started at 17. I started to conceive of fiction at around 20, 21. And I started the practice of writing every day. And that was the days of the manual typewriter. Yeah. I mean, up until the early 90s, I was on a manual typewriter all the time. I would have to buy new ones at the secondhand stores or the pawn shops in Toronto about every 2 years or so, just typing. And I have a big storm coming in. If I have Starlink, it's pretty resilient, but if I go out, I'm giving you a forewarning. It's very interesting that I'm getting a big rainstorm now. You can probably hear it. But the first book came out in 2007. I published with a boutique literary press in Canada. They only do 12 books a year. They often get shortlisted for the major Canadian literary prizes. And I sold the book in late 2003, and it came out in June of 2007. There was a big queue and line. Sorry, I spoke a bit of British there, but
sorry, we're a little sophisticated down here.
There's a little British and Canadian, but it was surreal to have my book published. And I remember the week I got word from my publisher. And I remember the week before it came out, it was almost like a panic attack. I thought people are going to think I'm crazy. I'm completely vulnerable. And then it came out and I got like 5-star reviews in every major daily newspaper from Vancouver to Halifax. And everybody said the same thing, that this does not seem like a first novel. I then got paired with and that lasted for 2 or 3 years. I went to all the book launches. I moved through the Toronto literary scene. I met everyone. I met Margaret Atwood. Very bad vibe, by the way. It was horrible for me, Robert. I was like a caveman in that world, what we're seeing mainstream now with DEI and stuff like like that. You have to understand in the arts, it started a decade and a half earlier. And here was this straight, white male coming from Christian culture, a Catholic family. And you'd get open contempt meeting people at book launches and stuff like that. It was quite daunting. And but it was a marvelous experience to publish my first book. I remember I used to go to a coffee shop on the Daily in the west of Toronto, and there was I did an interview with the arts editor for the Toronto Star, and if you ever do this, you're never told when it's coming out. It could be in 4 days. It could be in 2 weeks. It could be in. And so after a couple weeks, I forgot all about it. And then one day I walked into my coffee shop in Canada, which about 75 people could fit there, and it was usually packed. And they bought about 20 newspapers were put in there a day because people would go to the coffee shop to either work on their laptop or read a newspaper. And I walked into the coffee shop and like 20 or 30 newspapers folded back like this and stared at me. And that was they did a feature piece on me in the Toronto Star, and people were coming up and shaking my hand, and it was quite an experience. And you know, and then I realized, and I guess this is my own inner McCarthy, that I really wanted nothing to do with it.
That's really funny. I don't know if you know this, but Joe Rogan just interviewed Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
And they talk about the runway.
Yeah.
And like neither of them wanted to ever be on the runway.
Yeah.
And it was like, and I thought that Rogan had a really good kind of metaphor for it. It's like radiation. You can take a little, but you can't take a lot.
Yeah. It's very corrupting, and everybody around you becomes very sycophantic. I got optioned for film. I spent a year of my life working on a SODEC grant, which is the Quebec version of a telefilm grant. I got paired with a director and a producer, and I did 11 drafts of the screenplay. Now, these two guys, both from Montreal, had done a film previously and carried a lot of antagonism toward each other. And it was like I was being tortured. And then after a year, I said, okay, 11 drafts is enough. This project is dead. I got to go back to tech writing. You know, the little bit of grant money you gave me was used up in the first 3 months. And I've used up all my savings from tech writing. I pay $500 a month in child support. I can't do this any longer.
Right.
So it made me consider like the economics of art, you know, and economics and looking at the world through economics is a big part of the first book. And my father was an economist. He was actually the lead negotiator for Canada on the original free trade deal. And my brother is a chartered financial analyst and retired second in command with the Canada pension program, which is our social security. So he was managing, I think, somewhere around $90 billion. It's all on rails, though. You can't do any risky bets in controlled pensions. In Canada, the US might be a big difference, actually. And those were my highest marks in journalism school, by the way, were micro and macroeconomics. And then when I started to look at things through the lens of economics, I realized the whole thing is rigged. Mm-hmm. You know, unless you're living on a trust fund, and unless you're getting the writing grants, you're not going to make it. And then you look at all the people who get the writing grants, and you can see this invisible hand shaping, or in my perspective, destroying culture. And I saw the whole thing just go completely DEI and completely transgender. And, you know, not that there isn't some good, really good native fiction in Canada and other fiction coming from, I guess, what we would call back then a minority perspective. There were some really good books, but all of the grant institutions went in this direction. So it was very, very disheartening for me. I ended up getting paired with the best agent in Toronto, really huge agency. And I had a 2-book deal with Penguin to be published simultaneously in Toronto, New York, and London. And both books had been optioned by a Canadian producer who did Wyatt Earp with
Val Kilmer and
Kevin Costner.
Wow.
And then when I went into the editorial meeting,
Is that why? Okay, yeah, okay,
yeah. When you go into the editorial meetings, here's literature in a nutshell. You go into the editorial meetings, they sit you at the head of a board table, and there's about 8 seats on each side, and the head of the agency is at the end. I won't say this gentleman's name. And the 2 rows are just lined with the most gorgeous 25-year-old women you've seen, $100,000 in debt because of master's in fine arts degree in creative writing.
Right.
And they're all telling you how to change your book. And I went to a couple of these meetings, and then I just folded up my papers and said, I can't do this. And I walked out. And everything since then has been self-published.
Uh-huh.
Now, the most commercially successful book I've had is hands down The Stardust Ranch. It's sold about, I'd say, it's hard to gauge between the EPUB, the Kindle, and the paperback and the hardback, but I'd say probably over 4,000 copies. And for every copy of a book sold, you can assume 3 readers. And there's bootleg PDFs on the internet now. So I suspect 50 or 100,000 people have read that book. It's so prolific now. I experienced the 6 degrees of separation with that book here in Costa Rica. A friend in another province like Guanacaste will call me up and say, hey, I bumped into somebody yesterday who's read Stardust Ranch. They want to meet you. And I said, oh. And then here I am, loving poetry and literature, and I become a little bit famous for a UFO book. Now, it's a good book, and it's very literary.
Right.
But it's like the ultimate, like my whole literary life has just been one kick in the nuts after another.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't fit the type, obviously. And the way the culture, if we can even use that term now, I think we have to do culture/programming. The way that it is so insidious, and how it either incentivizes or de-incentivizes creativity, individuality, is pretty profound when you step back and look at it. So we're not that far apart chronologically. You're 6 years younger than me. So I grew up, I would say, in the 70s. That was like my, from 10 to 20, my formative years. And I was going through this over on my show the other day, and I was looking at, I saw this episode of The Partridge Family, and it was the Partridge Family got mistakenly booked for a show in Detroit. Now, of course, Detroit is some back lot in LA somewhere, right? So they have to make it look like Detroit. And they wind up going to this community center club called the Firehouse. And so by mistake, they go to Detroit, and the Temptations, who were supposed to play in Detroit, are in Phoenix. So they go into the Firehouse and look around, and who slides down the Firehouse pole? It's Richard Pryor, right? And then his buddy, who is there to run the Firehouse with him, is Louis Gossett Jr. So they're the nice black guys who were trying to run this community center, and they're being shaken down by this black mobster who, if they can't pay for this one payment, they're going to take the club over on Monday night. And the Partridge Family comes in and saves the day for Richard Pryor, Louis Gossett. And there's a couple of scenes where Danny, who always got the funny lines, by the way, Danny winds up bonding with a black radical Black Panther group.
Yeah.
And they become part of the story. And then they make him this honorary member. And I'm like looking at this, I'm like, there's a reason why people didn't have a race issue for the most part in the 70s. It was because TV was telling us these people are cool. Like you can hang out with them, you can bond with them. And the idea behind that was we want to make sure that we bring these people into society so they can buy a bunch of shit. Right? When they walk into your store, you won't turn them away or whatever. So there was this interesting racial harmony for me in the 70s because I grew up in a very diverse place. And I used to hang out with, black dudes and Mexican dudes. And so that was just, not everybody did that, but I did that. And I realized that part of that was shaped by what I was watching. I wanted to play for, the White Shadow, and be on that team. Right. So to your point, the reason I'm bringing this up is that that's one layer of the programming. Another layer of the programming is they're going to force you to change your style based on the economics of the model. They'll incentivize you to be somebody that you're not, essentially.
Yeah, and then you're not doing it for the right reasons. It's interesting you mentioned Detroit, and we're having this literary discussion and the business and culture of the literati. I don't know how this slipped past me, but I just yesterday watched Searching for Sugarman. Have you ever seen it?
No, and Jamie and I were talking about that before the show. We were just shooting the shit. He brought that up, and so why don't you tell people about it?
Well, it's about this Latin singer named Rodriguez from Detroit who cut a couple albums in the early 70s, got totally ripped off by his managers, but
I think the storm has hit. Okay, we're going to let the storm pass. Pass, storm, pass. All right. Looks like Bruce is frozen up on us. Maybe his Starlink has. Let me text him. Hold on. He's out. All right, let's see if we get back in here. Okay, so I just let him know that he might be blanked out by his electrical storm, thunder, lightning, wind, rain, whatever gets in the way of the connection with Starlink. So he knows, and hopefully he can come back and join us. Wow, this was going great. This is going really, really great. So I'll do my best to hold down the fort while Bruce is working on the tech side of things. Let's see. He's back in the studio. Yeah, you're back.
Little power glitch there.
No worries, man. You warned us.
I did, and but we do have to take note that this rarely happens when I'm podcasting. So, so Rodriguez cut these two magnificent albums, and he ended up not making it, and he went on to live a really beautiful life. He had 3 daughters, raised them well. He did construction work, and unbeknownst to him, he had become a huge phenomenon in South Africa and was instrumental in apartheid. And they thought in South Africa that he had died. They had heard stories that he had OD'd on drugs. And one story going around was that he had immolated himself on stage, lit himself on fire like one of those Buddhist monks. But it was all untrue. And they found him and brought him back to South Africa for 5 sold-out concerts. But it was about a real artist finally connecting with his audience. And yeah, but getting back to the literary thing, and let's try and merge this, I think, with some of the topics that you and I are immersed in now, like what's going on with the world, what are the negative forces working against it, conspiratorial or transparent. And everybody focuses on the media, Mockingbird media and all of these sorts of things. But you have to be literate to understand that the first people they needed to take out were the writers. I don't think there's been any writer of significance. And even Hemingway, they had to get rid of him. I don't think he was I read, he was not in Cuba, due to whoremongering and alcoholism. He was chased out of the US by the IRS. And then after this phenomenal writer, Ernest Hemingway, whatever you think of him, I mean, he had, I don't have a high opinion of sport hunters. Hunting for sustenance is okay. But you look at literature and they bring in these beats, and there were some of them, really, when you get into it, I talk about this in The Light of Darkness. That was really ugly. People don't see how ugly that was. I mean, Burroughs and Ginsberg were openly advocating for pedophilia.
They're degenerates. The beats are, for the most part, degenerates. And there's a whole weird story with Burroughs and the murder of this guy in Kerouac, right? It's very, very dark. And I believe Ginsberg might have been an official/unofficial member of NAMBLA. So the beats are the thing about Hemingway is that, like, a lot of it is about how to be a man.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of code, like man code, and what a man does when, they face adversity. And so Hemingway kind of understands this, and he's grappling with these big questions about masculinity, character. And this is something that the beats just, threw out the window, on the road to Nirvana. Right. And it is the one thing about the beats that's kind of interesting is that they're willing to kind of explode the form and experiment. And that's kind of cool. But culturally, I think you can make a point. It's a downhill slide from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So they, and the really good writers that were allowed to exist. And I mean, it was touch and go with McCarthy. I'm amazed he kept writing, but he did get a MacArthur grant, $250,000 actually, I think, after he finished Suttree. But he had a very, very hard life. And again, it comes down to the economics of writing. Like, how do you spend a year or two on a manuscript and go over it, 3, 4, 5 times? Where do you come up with that time? And it's the same for any medium now, how movies get made and everything. But the entire 20th century, I think the blueprint for it is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I mean, they followed that to a T. That wasn't a prediction; it was a plan, which is the case with most of the things out there that are predicting, including to a large extent latter prophecy. I always say, Revelation is a plan, and people say, "Well, why do you think that?" And I said, I don't think God would subcontract war, disease, and famine to the people that are engineering it. This doesn't seem God-made; it seems man-made, and yet people. And this is the thing about understanding yourself internally and coming to a little bit of self-awareness. You can't weed through the deceptions unless you can think multidimensionally. Right. They're just so prolific now, and I suspect we're going to get into that as we get into Charlie and Nepal and Qatar, as you said you wanted to. But everything now is just some sort of, diabolical, multi-layered plan by a people or a cabal of people that are able to think much better than we think. You can't deny this. They're much smarter than we are, at least as a group consciousness, at least as the crowd, to reference the book. So, I've kept going.
Let me pause you for a second there.
Yeah.
I have an idea, but I want to hear what your thoughts are on this. Why do you think that is? Why do you think this group tends to be smarter, more organized, more plan-based than, say, perhaps other groups who are still fumbling around in the dark?
I think it has something to do with what they answer to. Whatever they're answering to doesn't forgive. And I think the binary before the human race now is, what is the greatest motivator? Is it love or is it fear?
Right.
And at the moment, it seems like fear is winning. But what I think fear does in the end is it reignites a kind of free and in a way reckless love, where, well, look, if I'm going to be destroyed anyways, I'm going to live from my heart. I'm not going to fit into all of these things anymore. I think the negative and the positive work together cosmically to evolve the human race.
Yeah.
And I think the negative has been given a large mandate now. But pretty much everything now is extremely negative. So my simple answer to your question is, I think the consequences of failure in their world are quite grave. And this is why you don't get a lot of whistleblowers. You don't get a lot of people breaking ranks. And every once in a while you see it, like the silver belly of a fish breaking the surface of lake water at dusk. You just catch a glimpse of it, like, the banker hanged under the bridge
Right.
during the 33-day Pope and things like that.
That's an amazing, that's an amazing story in and of itself, which, by the way, was repeated by Terry Gilliam in the movie. What is it? This is one of his last movies.
The Fisher King?
No. It's I'm having a blank, but that event, that banker, 33rd degree Mason, he was God's banker, right? Yeah. It'll come to me anyway. Yeah. So I agree with you. So the consequences for failure on their end are very dramatic. They also seem to be playing by a completely different set of rules. Like we have undertaken to some degree, like a stand on morality or being human or having heart, right? Yeah. So many of us come out of this Christian tradition, where forgiveness, love, redemption, it's all kind of woven into the fabric of our lives. Even if you're an atheist, you're not going to be able to escape that.
Yeah.
And the people who we're talking about, they have no relationship with that at all. And I threw this out on Twitter just to stir up some dust. Like, I don't really believe in karma, not in the way that people understand it. And yet the masses almost accept it like a religion. And the people that we're talking about, they don't believe in karma. They don't have any investment in, how God, or the God that we might answer to at the end of our days, they have no investment in that whatsoever. So it's like being in the Vietnam War, and there are the rules of engagement, and the Vietnamese were always going to win because they didn't have the same rules.
Yeah.
And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people. It's like, here's a set of rules for you, whether it's some Christian belief or faith or system that has evolved your point of view, or maybe you skipped over to the East and adopted the karma thing. They've kind of got people boxed in, and they have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So we're off over here trying to live a normal, moral, decent, loving, life, and they're like, well, have fun with that because we'll fuck you, 6 ways a Sunday.
I do believe in karma, and my answer to why it appears they're not getting theirs is that they've mastered the ritual magic of scapegoating and transferring the karma. Mark Passio speaks about this a lot, and I think that the entire modern system, the birth certificate system, is karma scapegoating, right? So in the law of karma, because everybody is given conscience, everybody is sold, the action rests upon you. You can't say, well, I was ordered to do this and it was my job. Now, if you look at the world through that lens, you will begin to see how horrific it is. We've created a society where people can go into work every day, a nurse in a hospital in Toronto, and I've had nurse friends reach out to me. They know they're killing people with these injections. They argue with the hospital administrators and the senior doctors on the floor, and they're told to do it. And they have to give these injections or they lose their job, and they literally know they're killing people. And so this is another aspect of the incredibly negative system we're in now, which is, the defilement of the good and the well-natured. And when people think of warfare, we have this simplistic view of warfare coming up from shield and sword, mounted cavalry, then the horrors of the first concentration camps in South Africa that the English put the Boers in 1905. Then we come into mechanized war, which is one of the catalysts, I think, for Eliot's The Wasteland. And then we come into the Second World War, and now it's all done at computer screens, and people don't realize what they're doing. And we look at warfare, and you've got the UFC and all of these gladiator games like ancient Rome, but the real weapons are right in front of us, and we never see them as weapons. The greatest weapon ever created was money, and then concatenating that with centralized banking, and then through the 70s, taking the independence of those central banks away and concatenating them all into a mega structure that's run by the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, and the World Bank. Now under duress and possibly going to be replaced by BRICS, I don't know, but I would suspect that the BRICS alliance is at the top level under the same forces that gave us the Bretton Woods banking system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think you meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Right.
And if you're out about in the world and you're privy to the Chinese colonial footprint, which is largely commercial, they don't go in the way we did. The reviews are coming in already, and they're not that positive. Ask Africa about Chinese investment. So it's meet the old boss, same as the new boss.
Right.
So how do we get out of this system? Well, I don't know. It almost has to burn to the ground because money is such a hypnotic thing in everybody's lives. I mean, I make a good living. My principal living is grant writing. I get paid on commission, and I get paid very well. I do tax credit grant writing for technology companies in countries that have programs for tax credits based on R&D and experimental development. I'll be doing some grant writing for some native communities in Canada in the next 3 months. Everybody has to work, but as you're going through all of this, when you look at the last 300 years or so, 375 years, I'd say since the formation of the Bank of England, it's not too hard, and you don't have to be conspiratorially minded to see money as the greatest weapon ever invented. So the purpose of a weapon is to get people to submit to your will. So you can do that by force and violence, and then money comes in, and it does it pretty easily, right? Because everybody's on this monthly nut. It all starts in the early 20th century. I think the first monthly bill was probably the British coal tax about 400 years ago. And there was no reason for that tax. The king just decided that he would tax coal. And he created a guild called the Worshipful Company of Fuelers, and their job was to collect the coal tax. You could almost look at that as the first private-public partnership. And then we just go from there. And now it's just producing so much chaos in people. It's very difficult to understand what I do to explain it to people. There are all these programs that have been put in them to call me a conspiracy theorist, even though I'm just holding out the color blue and saying this is blue. But the program is telling them he's crazy. That's not blue. He's crazy. So I don't know how we get out of this. I'll get out of it. I mean, I moved 30 minutes up a dirt road into a UNESCO heritage site in southern Costa Rica and have probably 40-50% of my food supply readily at hand. So, but I mean, if everybody did that immediately, went to private communities, I think you're going to see some variant of the kibbutz spreading up all over America, where groups of people go out and buy 1,000 hectares and have doctors in the community and have medical equipment in the community and have 80-90% of their food supply, and will still have revenue coming in because they'll have internet, and there'll be a bunch of people on the kibbutz working as customer support people making $2,500 a month, which they wouldn't even be able to survive on in Cincinnati or Phoenix or any even small city, let alone LA or New York. But because their homes are all paid off, they don't have property tax because they studied the zoning regulations and built on wild or rural areas that had no zoning. And there are ways to do this. They'll be free of this monthly nut. But the monthly nut just gets worse and worse through the 20th century. Now they have apps on your phone that can list all your monthly expenses, because most people forget how many they have. Oh, there's my Zoom, there's my Google Gemini AI, there's this, there's that. And they very cleverly tied it to the lunar cycle. So it's actually the solar cycle, but it's, the 28-day cycle. The bills are monthly. So it's secretly entraining your mind to think this is natural. It isn't. And then when you live in this system for a number of generations, you start to get what I would call polluted generations who can't connect to the natural order now. The 4 quarters are the 4 seasons. Right. And everybody's living urbanly now. And if they get their way, we're going to be living in 15-minute cities, which will be a complete cutoff from the natural order, which I think is our first spiritual teachers. And I think that the Vedics and the Taoists agree with me completely. It's interesting how Christianity abolishes nature as a teacher. I mean, you get it a little bit in St. Francis of Assisi, but the great chain of being in the Christian system coming out of the Vatican completely cuts us off from lower spiritual instruction. I understand the principle of seeking God consciousness from a universal perspective, but it's not a sin to interact with elementals if you're a farmer. They're going to help you. You're not practicing paganism. They were probably put there to help you. So the whole Western system now is going through a kind of invisible explosion. Now, I have a theory. This just came to me a couple days. I was going to do a podcast on this. But the theory is one word, and the theory is split. So everything is splitting now. The family split in the 70s. We're getting a race split, an economic split.
Gender split.
Gender split. This is, I think, the magical element of fission and fusion. I don't think people understand this correctly. And there's a reason so many Satanists were involved in that kind of work, rocketry and all of those sorts of things. Now, I don't believe in Satan as he's described, but there are negative principalities. And when I talk about these things, I try to admonish people not to argue about the details, whether it's extraterrestrials or whether it's demons. What does it matter? Something we can't see is trying to destroy us. And you can recognize it by these characteristics. It has an almost unbelievable, limitless hatred for the human race, whatever it is. Okay. And you see it in our leaders. They hate our guts, right? They take joy in our destruction. It's amusement for them. And so we have to have a new way of talking about it. And again, unifying the people who are starting to wake up if you get somebody who wakes up to simple multidimensionality of astral and physical, and they gain the ability to cast out demons, and they're working in an evangelical ministry, you can't conscript them to a larger mission because they become bound by their dogma, as
Right.
do the Muslims. So I think what we're looking for are spiritually awakened people who are also free of the dogma and free thinkers.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. You brought up some incredible points, especially around like the economic nut that everybody has to crack, right? And the insidious ways. Now, you talked about karma in this kind of a generic yet somewhat specific way. I'd like to use the word consent that goes along with that, because none of it happens without our consent, right?
Yeah.
And so I recently inherited.
May I ask, before you get into your main point, may I ask you, why do you think that is?
Why do I think consent is important?
Yeah.
Well, I think consent is important because we're agreeing to their terms and conditions. Yeah. It's an invisible contract that binds us to whatever kind of reality, false reality, surreality that they lay out for us. And so we unconsciously agree to it.
Do you not, avoiding the word karma because it's toxic, but do you not then see this as evidence of the controllers being somewhat tenuous around what we'll call a causal force that they don't want to disrupt?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. When I talk about karma, I use the word a little bit loosely. Like, I'm not responsible for what happened in America prior to the Civil War, right? And there are people, groups who would say, specifically people that look like you and I would be, and that that this is our, that we're responsible for that, and this is our karma, right? This is our social karma by importing hundreds of thousands of Indians. Somehow that's a karmic payback to what we did with the Native American Indians. I don't really buy it at that level.
No, I don't buy that either.
Yeah. So getting back to this thing around economics. So my mother's passed away for about a year now, and I'm trying to still. Oh, thank you. She was a piece of work, amazing piece of work. I think we all have those stories. And I'm like looking at the insurance bill, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what if I bundle everything up in my name, take care of this, make sure the insurance company knows the house is in my name. I've got her car in my name. I'm a younger demographic. It's not going to be as much. If I bundle it up, it's going to be less expensive. So I start this thing, and this guy comes back to me from my insurance company, and he says, well, unfortunately, it's going to be more. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Right? And it's like, well, if you're really concerned about your insurance rates, we have this device and this app that you can attach to your car. Basically, it monitors how you drive. And if you're a good driver, it shows up through their app and through their monitoring, and therefore you get. So this is the incentivation, right? Oh, I'll get to save $50 a month if I allow you to track me. And so that's the whole consent part, right? I'm not going to give you my fucking consent for that. It's like, I'll spend the extra money for the anonymity. But so I'm on the phone with the guy, and I said, this is kind of ridiculous, because we're talking about inflation. They're using inflation as this excuse to ramp up the prices. There may be some truth to it, but not the totality of it. And I said, do you know who Klaus Schwab is? World Economic Forum. Have you ever heard of that guy? He says, yes, I have. I said, this is exactly what he was talking about. We would be priced out of everything, and we would own nothing. This is exactly what's happening. And I had to give him my little 2 cents while I was negotiating my insurance contract with the guy, because I couldn't get out of there without him understanding that he's participating in that system. And he knows it now. Just like your nurse in Toronto who is willingly giving these shots, he's willingly going along with, and even though he knows who he is, right?
Yeah.
He's got to make his nut.
Yeah.
So there we go. So I just wanted to give you some feedback on that, and that was my recent experience with it.
So I see that. I see all of it as an intentional demoralization campaign.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't see it clearly in America yet, remember that I'm Canadian and I still follow Canadian news. And the entire decade of Trudeau Jr., Justin, was a giant demoralization campaign. That country has been utterly transformed in the decade he ruled. He literally destroyed the country. And now we've got a guy who is, I mean, he must be in the top tiers of whatever visible authority is running things. You don't, in all of my years of studying economics, I've never seen a foreigner poached to run a central bank, let alone a Canadian recruited to run the Bank of England. That tells you who Mark Carney is. And so it seems really hopeless now. And I don't mean to spread hopelessness, but at an organizational level, I just don't see how it's going to get any better. And these forces of destruction are everywhere in the United States now. We see them on the street. Now a lot of it again is the product of the greatest weapon is money. A lot of these activists are incentivized by pay, and they're false. They're not organic, but nonetheless, we see, and we're being told by our own academe in the West, and we're being told by external sources that we deserve this. I don't believe that. I
agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, and they're trying to use this idea of karma or reciprocity to jam it down through people's throats. But this is not real karma. We didn't do this. Right. You know, if you want reparations for British colonialism, track down the descendants of the East India Company. I'll find some forensic auditors and but.
Go hunt down the Goldschmidt family.
Right? Yeah, I mean, the kind of rhetoric we're getting out of people like Gavin Newsom now and Kamala Harris, and which are the American versions of Justin Trudeau, it's just ridiculous. And it's meant to be ridiculous. It's meant to insult us. It's meant to alienate and isolate us. Yeah. But you can't really react very emotionally because you'll be targeted.
Yeah. So I agree. The emotional part is something that I talk about a lot, because if you spent any real time meditating on the situation, contemplating it, you will be furious and enraged. Yeah. And everything becomes a flashpoint, and everybody is the potential to be an enemy, and your cortisol levels go through the roof. You're always in fight or flight, and they have us at each other's throats.
100%.
Yeah.
Where would you like to go from here, Robert? We haven't really touched the world at all.
Let's get into this. One of the things I noticed just before the show started, somebody sent me confirmation that Ben Shapiro is now the head of Turning Point USA. Why don't we start there?
Well, that's extremely disturbing to me. There's many ways to look at what Trump is doing. Now, I see some positive aspects to Trump, not in him. I'll give you my honest interpretation of what's going on with Trump. I've said this on my podcast. I believe Trump is divinely afflicted. So what is a divine affliction? It means that everything he says and does pushes us toward a greater revelation of what's really going on, whether that was his intent or not. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and I saw this in 2016, and the American interpretation of it was more religious. The evangelicals thought that this was a great spiritual voice sent to them to resurrect old America and things like that. And I went, well, I don't know about that, but there does seem to be some kind of divine affliction with him. Now, the reformation of the institutions, whatever they're going to do, I mean, the firings at, whatever they're going to do with the CIA and the FBI and the NSA and the various other intelligence organizations, to myself, I've never said this on my podcast, but to myself, Robert, I honestly wonder if this is not a full Mossad takeover of the United States.
Well, that was going to be the next sentence out of my mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really alarming. And I called this in 2016. So one of the things, and this became aware to me after I wrote The Light of Darkness with an ex-Navy SEAL and CIA contractor, very interesting guy. And this happened in 2020. And in the course of writing the book, this CIA contractor had initiated into Palo Mayombe, which is one of the darker spiritual practices, similar to voodoo and similar to Santeria, but I think ultimately much more potent. And he said, okay, Bruce, to write this chapter, you're going to have to understand it. So he sent me all the initiatory texts for Palo Mayombe, and I read them. And you're supposed to be cursed if you get those outside of proper channels, but nothing's happened to me. And I had never considered the force of black magic before. And then I had it demonstrated, and I went, okay, it's real. It's scientifically, it's been proven to me. But the thing about multidimensional science is you can't achieve wide scale consistency. It's not like a combustion engine, but it can be proven to your satisfaction. It could be proven to almost anyone's satisfaction that remote viewing is real if they had access to a good remote viewer and they were shown it. So then I started to think about it, and I went, oh my God, everything that's going on is leading up to the rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon, which the two pillars going up through the 20th century are science and magic. Those are the pillars of Solomon as I see them. Now the science has been very open and transparent. The magic has been hidden. The best kind of society for magicians to operate in are societies that are so rational they ridicule people who talk about magic. That's the very best society.
Because the science is the magic, right?
The science is the magic in some degree, yes.
That's what they want to sell us.
Yep.
But that's really what's happening.
Yep. So the two corollaries are CERN and the Temple of Solomon. And everything that's going on now is about building the Temple of Solomon. And I don't believe for a moment they're content to build it underground. I think it has to be above ground.
Yes.
And they want that location. What is it called? That specific location where the Alaska Mosque is built.
Yeah, it's the Dome of the Rock, right?
Dome of the Rock, yeah. But yes, I thought it had so Golgotha, where Christ was crucified, that's not the same location, right? That's a little more distant.
Yeah. Yeah. Have they slaughtered the red heifers yet?
I believe they did. I believe the trial run was the real thing. They said it was a trial run, but I think it was the real thing. I don't think you're allowed to do trial runs of rituals. I think it's offensive to the entities you're dealing with. So I think they did it, and I could feel something in the psychosphere. And then a few weeks later, I found out that they did the red heifer ritual. And then there's another thing, like we live in a world where the media will openly mock Muslims and Christians for their beliefs, and nobody stops to say, okay, right. You're never going to see anybody look Rabbi Shmuley right in the eyes on Piers Morgan and say, so let me understand this. Your goal is to build a magical temple in which you're going to ritually sacrifice animals because your God likes the blood. And then you're going to burn the carcass because your God likes the smell of burning flesh. But Islam and Christianity are ludicrous. Right. I don't know how they get away. There's one of the biggest spells operating right now. I think the whole Abrahamic system is dying. I think that when you pivot a power-based, control-based, religious / multidimensional teaching on prophecy, which I think, and you set dates. Well, what happens if those dates aren't hit? If nothing happens, something has happened. Think of the psychic chaos and all the believers.
Yeah.
Right. So we're in a very dangerous time now. In our collective co-creation of this reality, because a lot of people, probably about 3 billion who've been caught up in these Abrahamic systems, are just going crazy now. Now, don't confuse what I'm saying with, like, I'm not crapping on all the religions. So when I'm studying spirituality, I follow people, not. So for me, Islam is Rumi, Hafiz, and Ibn Arabi, the great saint of the 12th century. And anybody on spiritual path should read Ibn Arabi. You don't have to convert to Islam. When I think of Christianity, I think Aquinas was a genius with the 7 deadly sins. I think St. Francis of Assisi was the real deal, a kind of accidental, almost idiot savant saint who stumbled into it. And what happens is the institutions come in and patent it. Well, this is because of the church. No, he just hit God consciousness because it was his time in the cycle. That's all there is to it.
And then you have the Dominicans coming in on top of that and say, we can't have any more of this Franciscan stuff.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's enough of this. This is a little too Christian for our taste. Have you ever seen the movie? And we're going to come back to this topic and dive into this Ben Shapiro thing. But have you ever seen the movie The Devil's Advocate?
Is that Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves?
It's Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves. That movie is the blueprint.
Yeah.
That is the blueprint. There's a scene in the movie where Al Pacino sends Keanu Reeves to go visit this guy, Delroy Lindo, the actor. And he is a voodoo high priest.
Yeah, I remember the cow's tongue.
The cow's tongue, right?
Yeah.
And then they go into the trial and the guy just keeps coughing and keeps drinking, right? And it's like, they're telling you this is what goes on behind the scenes. Yeah. And if you watch The Devil's Advocate, you'll learn a lot, including the fact that the guy that Keanu Reeves has to defend, who's an architect, builder, killer, that's all shot in Trump's apartment.
I did not know that. Are you kidding me?
No, it's all shot in Trump's penthouse apartment.
Now, this is something people have a lot of trouble with. Even my rational mind, the journalism graduate, had difficulty with these things, even after 33 years of meditation, leaving my body and everything. But then when I started writing these books, it all came out. And I've been severely attacked a couple times by intentional black magic. One time, after a year of praying and dancing with the Sufis in the West End of Toronto, the sheikh said, it's time to convert to Islam. And I said, I can't do that. I love the way you pray. I love being a part of the Saturday night service, but I'm not going to conscript to a religion that prescribes a universal and eternal hell, because fear is the mother of violence. And that's why there's so much violence in this culture. And I see you as a somewhat enlightened person, the Sufi sheikh. And I said, this all took place in the same coffee shop where I went. And I said, I don't think you should be supporting this. I think that, you should go to a more universal spirituality. Well, he had not karmically untangled from the dogma of Islam and took that very bad. And I went through a horrific 6 weeks, voice to skull, being poked and prodded at night. I had to fast. I had to meditate. And then finally somebody came in, took pity on me and came in and helped me. And then it was all dispelled, but it was one of the most profound demonic attacks of my life, or jinn, or whatever he was using. And they can do that. There's a spiritual element to this war we're in now that people don't realize. And we're sort of kicking our heels, watching Netflix and going through this in a rational state of mind. And meanwhile, 1.5 billion Muslims are ritually enacting our destruction, which affects the astral and the ether there, and whether it's an egregor or whether they're actually calling negative entities, it's all real. And then the second major attack was, again, Andrew Bartzis, the galactic historian. He tried to kill my son and I, October 29th, 2022. It was a vicious black magic attack. It came on as quickly as food poisoning, Robert. And then
now, Andrew Bartzis, was he the dentist? What's his story?
He bills himself as the galactic historian. He was a very proficient Akashic record reader. He went very dark. I think he's responsible for at least a half dozen psychic murders.
He
And
used
I
to
wrote
be
a couple.
he used to be on Gaia TV with Regina Meredith.
He may have been interviewed on Gaia, but they never gave him a program.
Yeah, no, he was interviewed by Regina a couple times. Yeah.
So through the course of writing all these books, like John Edmonds' Stardust Ranch, John was a first-gen super soldier. That should let you know something about the UFO movement. And Robert Wiegand was just the most capable person I've ever seen in my life of walking through the astral. I've never met anyone his equal. And a price comes with that. He's trying to undo that now. Bartzis was a gigantic psychic in his heyday, like super psychic. Like, these guys are so powerful, you wonder why they haven't been grabbed up by the intelligence agencies. And then you start to figure it out. Right. And when you interact with these people, and you've been on path for 3.5 decades, meditating an hour to 4 hours a day, you osmotically pick it all up. So in the 6 years of writing these books, I had so much paranormal experience on this mountain in the middle of nowhere, portals opening up, all kinds of stuff. And it was like a PhD. And then my own spirit, my own guides taking me through it securely to learn all of this stuff, to have the courage to speak about it, because you can't be certain it's real if you don't experience it. So I needed to be attacked by black magic, and I was immediately protected. The attack from Bartzis only lasted about 15 minutes, and then I went in and reputationally decapitated him with 15,000 words of journalism. I just put a posting on Facebook, has anybody had any negative experiences with this guy, and ended up using about a quarter of the interviews. So many people from all over the world came forward. Wow. And we're going to see a lot of this now. There's a lot of spirituality out there that is really, really negative, masquerading as positive. And it's embedded in the New Age movement and various new paradigms. And I think this is the religion they want to go to, the Blavatsky religion, right? And it'll fool a lot of people. You know, it's in the Indian scripture, it's the difference between the Sadguru, which is mastery of cosmic consciousness, and the Satguru, which is complete surrender to the divine. Now, in the Western paradigm, we might call a Satguru Luciferian. Now, Luciferian consciousness, not many people understand this. It can be benign or malignant. You know, Manly P. Hall was a very benign 33rd degree Mason, which is why they're burying all his material now. But the vast majority of them are negative. And their rationale is, well, we live in a very negative time, and I have to, ensure my bloodline. So I'm going to do this, this, and this. I didn't create this negative timeline. I didn't create this Kali Yuga. I'm justified in doing this. I don't blame anybody or judge anybody. We're just in this bizarre human comedy drama that just, if you have the right perspective, it's just hilarious. But negative Luciferian consciousness is what's creeping up now. And with the revelation of the apartment scene in The Devil's Advocate, I would say that Trump is, he's going to bring about all this stuff. And I'll give you my interpretation of why this is being done. So when you're dealing with the divine, you have unlimited access to energy because the divine is limitless. When you're dealing in control-based and power-based multi-dimensional consciousness, the energy has to be harvested from somewhere because the divine will kind of cut you off. And so the Antichrist figure will earn the trust of the human population by killing everybody beyond a certain tier in the Luciferian structure and exposing them. And this will be the way the trust is gained. You see, I took out all these pedophiles. You had no idea this was going on. Big Daddy Trump took care of this, even though I'm a pedophile myself. And all of the power will be gathered up into one person. Now, whether Trump is the person or not, I don't know. They can use, just like a fuse box, they can use Trump as the fuse to channel the energy to the person it's really going to be. And this person will be able to do miracles. They will be able to change reality as we understand it, and a lot of people are going to be fooled. And but it seems as though the process is in full motion right now. And what's going to happen when it's all said and done is the role of the negative in the larger picture is to scarify the earth the way a lightning bolt hitting a forest would burn down the trees and the ashes remineralize the earth. So the negative exists in the cosmic structure to re-spiritualize us. So you can't be too hard on these people. They're playing a role. I deal with a lot of people who have demonic botherance, and I say to them, well, where were you at in life before this happened? And if they were atheist or agnostic to spiritual reality, not to Yahweh or any of these jackass gods, but if they were atheist or agnostic to spiritual reality, I say, you realize the demon blessed you. The worst life you could possibly have is one where you go through the whole thing in the machine and never see below or above, and you just think this is reality. That's the cursed life. The person attacked if the demons break cover to attack you, they're revealing multidimensional reality. And therefore, you have a new opportunity to re-engage this reality and try to do your best in it, but you've been blessed. And when I give people my philosophy on demons, they're shocked, right? Now, the final book I wrote, The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me, this will be the craziest thing I say on this interview podcast, Robert. I was paired with the demons and was able to communicate with them. And this was done by my friend Robert. And he said, look, the demons have gotten a really bad deal. We should write this book and tell the truth. I said, okay. And immediately, the demons did come in, and then they footnote everything so you can't misinterpret what's happening. So 3 or 4 people close to you psychically will call you from around the world and said, I had a dream with a demon last night. I said, was it scary? And they said, no, it was almost like he was just letting me know he was there. I said, have you ever had a dream with a demon before? They say no. And this is all going on in the beginning of the book. And so I worked with this one being that was appointed to me. I called him Creeper, and he wasn't offended by that. I could see him perfectly in my mind's eye. And it took me about 7 months to write the book, and then he gracefully left, and he thanked me for my service. It's a shocking thing to say to people, but it is the truth. And people don't understand demons. First of all, they don't understand anything about them. Demons look like clowns. In fact, clowns were brought out into the world by the Masons. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you study the history of clowns,
Red Skelton was a master Mason.
Yeah, generally the demons will be about 9 feet tall. They're very slender, and they'll have a kind of white powder on their face, very much like Death in Ingmar Bergman's Seventh Seal.
Right.
And they have the closest representation of the mouth I've ever seen, based on my interactions with Creeper, was Heath Ledger in The Joker. Mm-hmm. That is the demonic. And in more spiritually mature times, people understood that the demons were a kind of police force that began to give you a little bit of hell's punishment while you were still in the flesh, so you could change your ways. Mm-hmm. And hell exists. I mean, there are rehabilitation centers on the astral where you go, where what you've done incarnate in the physical plane, it might be too egregious for the physical plane to have the karma with you reincarnating. So it's worked off on the astral. And it's quite horrible. These people with the NDEs who go to the hell dimension, they're not lying, but it's not eternal. There are worse things than hell. There are dark spaces you can be put in the universe where you don't lose consciousness, but you don't have sense, you don't have memory, you don't have thought, you don't have feeling. You're basically left to exist as though you've been encased in a tomb. And those are the highly punitive places where they put the more advanced universal negative entities. So that's what I learned writing that book. So you can see, so I go from UFOs all the way into the demonic in this 4-book cycle, beginning with Stardust Ranch and ending with The Light of Darkness. I'm not sending these books. I'm sending you 2 literary EPUBs after this. I want you to read my literature.
Okay.
Read the book that got the 5-star, God as an Economist. You will fall over laughing.
Good.
And I got compared to Mark Twain. And
That's a high compliment.
Oh, I was flattered, which made it all the more painful when I realized I wasn't going to make it in the Canadian or global literary scene because I couldn't play ball. So yeah, I've been through a lot in the last 6 years, and it's, like I say, it's been a PhD in the paranormal, which I wasn't extremely familiar with despite meditating for 33 years. But now I am. Now, circling it all back to what's going on in the world, you nailed it with the cow tongue. There is so much magic going on now. It's unbelievable. Now, the Temple of Solomon will be like a quantum computer compared to a 1980s Game Boy in the world of magic. The temple is a magical accelerator. If you remember the mythos, the temple was literally constructed by demons. Solomon was given command over the demons. Now, I don't think God gave him that. Maybe the potentate of every dimension has its own potentate. So maybe the potentate of the astral or the 4th dimension gave him that. But so much of what we call the secret societies now, it's all springing off of Solomon and the Kabbalah. And while with both teachings you can turn out benign, 99% of them are turning out malignant now. So there seems to be some glitch in the process.
Well, when they introduce, go ahead.
Just before, this is specifically for you. So this is the book ending of the Age of Pisces. So at the beginning of the Age of Pisces, we get the construction of the second temple 2,500 years ago. And now 2,500 years later, the temple is back in the public consciousness in a big, big way, including, as I think we both agree, that they've commenced the rituals to invoke the temple, specifically the sacrifice of the red heifer. And this would be the proper bookend for the Age of Pisces. What do you think as a master astrologer?
Well, I would say you're over the target. And it brings me, whatever you think of what happened to Charlie Kirk, whether it was fake or staged or an op or real, like Charlie Kirk will never come back again. Like he'll never return into the flesh as Charlie Kirk. Okay.
Yeah.
And for me, that happening on 9/9, it actually happened on 9/10. So it was the day before 9/11. But we're coming off of 999, which is we're in a 9 year. So we have the 999, and the 999, we're at the height of the Irina Zatsuska theoretical killing in Charlotte, which is a mirror for Charlottesville, where you have the inverse happening. So they're doing inverse magic, right? Yeah. So in Charlottesville, it's all about the evil whites and how the evil whites and the white racists were taking over. Charlotte, it's the evil blacks who are, and Irina Zasutska, if you look at the timing, she's a virgin goddess that happens during the month of Virgo. So it is the sacrificial ritual. Again, whether you believe it or not,
I do.
So it's a ritual sacrifice of the White Virgin. We have that, and then right after that, we have Charlie Kirk on 9/10, going into 9/11, which is, in my estimation, I don't know where you land on this, but all the research I've done clearly points to that being the birthday of Jesus Christ, Yeshua Sananda Emmanuel. That is the day. It is not the 24th of December. And historically, I can prove this. I can prove this astrologically through astrotheology, born of the Virgin.
I believe you.
Right. So now we have this virginal sacrifice, and then you have Charlie Kirk. which is another ritual sacrifice happening one day before 9/11. And Tucker Carlson, again, whatever you think about him, he's about to unlock this documentary on 9/11. We're about to talk about 9/11 again. What are we talking about? We're talking about Charlie Kirk. Yeah. Which, again, if you look at it in sort of the allegorical Jesus terms, he is now the sacrifice, right? He is the blood sacrifice around the day where this historical being came into this world. It is not by coincidence. It's not by accident.
Yeah.
And now who takes over the game? Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Right? And that tells you everything. That is a microcosm of what happens after the death and the resurrection of Jesus. You have all these powers who are now angling for control over the mythos, the storytelling, the historical retelling of it, right? So we're in a very different time now. And to your point, I think even though it did not happen near a hill somewhere in Jerusalem, it's connected. This is connected to the temple, the slaughter of the red heifer. It's all part of what Ellis Taylor, who is an amazing numerologist and one of the first guests on my show years ago, calls a mega ritual.
Yeah. Hey, can you tell me a little bit about my chart?
Sure. Let's do it. You have a very
Tell
interesting
people about
chart.
the unusual overlap we have.
Yeah, let me get you up here. Where let me reopen.
I got these blue light blocker glasses. You should get a pair if you're in front of a screen all the time.
I have some. I just just not wearing them right now. Hold on a second. Let's see. Where are we? Bruce. By the way, you've got to be familiar with the Canadian actor, writer, director, Bruce McDonald as well. There's another. Yeah.
The Mick is the lesser Mac.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, he was at Ryerson studying film when I was at Ryerson University studying journalism.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm into the twinning stuff. Another interesting Canadian named Bruce is a guy by the name of Bruce Greenwood. And he was in a TV series called Nowhere Man. Have you ever seen Nowhere Man?
No.
Put it on your list. If you can find that somewhere on the internet, put Nowhere Man on your list. You will be, it's one of those revelation of the method hidden in plain sight things that they do.
Oh yeah, Bruce Greenwood. Yeah, he's probably one of our more popular Canadian actors coming into movies and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
The Nowhere Man is amazing. Basically, they disappear his identity, right? And he's got to find out who's doing it and why. And it goes back to this picture. He's a photographer, and it's a picture from the Vietnam War. It's like part Manchurian Candidate, part like Run for Your Life. It's really an incredible show. Okay.
Well, this is showing this in public is like the astral version of my wife hanging up my underwear to dry.
There you go. That's you. We're all about transparency here. So what Bruce is referring to is Mars at 0 Cancer, which we both share. And it's real. So Mars in Cancer, to let you know, Bruce, is considered a malefic in astrology. And it's a malefic because Mars is in its detriment in Cancer. And because its opposite sign, where it's exalted, is actually it's in its fall. So its opposite sign where it's exalted is in Capricorn. So we share the malefic, but because it's at the 0 degree point, number one, it's going to be stronger than any other Mars in Cancer, because as you move through the cycle, the planets begin to dissolute their power the further out they get. But it's also the degree of the summer solstice. And so there's a magical element to this 0 degree. The summer solstice, as you know, is considered the night of the witches globally.
Yeah.
Like they have their major rituals. And so Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare clearly is onto it, right? So there's a magical element to the 0 degree. And I'm a big fan of the Sabian symbols. Are you familiar with them at all?
No.
So the Sabian symbols were brought to us by Mark Edmund Jones and this woman named Elsie Wheeler. This back in the 30s. And Mark Edmund Jones is considered to be one of the first modern astrologers. And he chose the word Sabian because he saw himself in the lineage of the Sabian Brotherhood, which comes out of Babylon, which, of course, they believe was the first place that astrology really takes root. Anyway, he hires this woman, and she's older. She's not very sophisticated. She doesn't read newspapers. She's an old school medium. And he takes her into his car and spends 3 days in Balboa Park, California. And he gets these 3x5 cards, and he doesn't know what's on the bottom of the 3x5 card. It could be Mars, Cancer 0, Gemini 15, Leo 20. So they're mixed, right? So it's a double blind. And he'll ask her, what do you see here? And she would come up with a symbol for it, right? And so when it was all said and done, there were 360 of these. And then he put them together in cyclic order. And he didn't really do anything with them for years. So his buddy comes along, and his buddy is Dane Rudhyar, who is considered to be the kind of modern astrologer. He comes out of the this tradition of Blavatsky and the Great White Brotherhood. So he'll make a number of references to that through his interpretation of the symbols. I take those with a bit of a grain of salt, but his interpretation, I think, is probably one of the better ones, even though it's a little bit dated. So Mars 0, Cancer, basically goes to Mars 1, because you always go up 1 degree depending on the degree of the sign. And on a ship, the sailors lower an old flag and raise a new one. So this is a symbol of the false flag, or in some ways, if you were to take it into, say, Russia, right? It's literally the lowering of one flag and then the raising of another flag to symbolize the new government, right? So anyway, a radical change of allegiance exteriorized in a symbolical act, a point of no return. We have now reached a square, a 90-degree angle to the beginning of the cyclic process. That started at 0 Aries. This is a moment of crisis, a sharp turning point. In the zodiacal cycle at the summer solstice, the northward motion of the sun in declination stops. The sun rises and sets as far north of exact east and west as it can during the year cycle. Its motion is now reversed. Slowly, the sunset points move southward on the western horizon, and the length of the day decreases. In the lunation cycle from new moon to new moon, this is the first quarter phase. On the ship, which symbolizes the ego consciousness floating, as it were, on the vast sea, or the sea of vast unconscious, the individualized will makes a basic decision. The dominant yang force allows the yin force to begin a 6-month-long rise to power. The collective will gradually overcomes the individual. And at the end, the state will overpower the person. Now, however, the individual person enjoys his most glorious hour. He exalts in his ability to make a free decision, to act as an individual who selects his life goal and his allegiance. This is the first stage of the 19 five-fold series of the degree symbols. In a decisive act, heavy with consequences, the symbolic college youth might realize that he should bring to an end his quest for the ideal companion and enter into matrimony. He assents to the possibility of progeny, of home, responsibility. His consciousness accepts a process of fundamental reorientation, implying the stabilization of his energies. So on an individual level, like having Mars at this degree would indicate that you, me, people who have this through Mars, which is in its fall, come to a point of crisis. right? And in that point of crisis, there's a re-allegiance of what flag you want to fly in your life, basically. So when you were
Yeah.
in that cafe and the Sufi guy says, "Come fly our flag," right? You're like, "No, no, it's okay. I love what you do, but I'm not ready to sign up to become a citizen. I've got my own flag I'm going to fly," right?
Yeah.
Some people say it's like a freak flag or whatever it is. So this is a really interesting degree of Mars. And the other point of this degree of Mars, and I don't know where you lean on this, but when I was growing up, I got into fights, right? But I was always bad when I started them. I held my own when I had to defend myself, but it was always terrible when I started them. And so when you have Mars in Cancer, you're really good at defending. Like, because Cancer itself is not a sign like Aries that is always on the aggression. It's always on the attack. Mars in Cancer is more kind of reactive in some ways. So in that reactive mode, it can be Mars, it can function as Mars, but it cannot be aggressive. What it can be is it can be a defender, somebody who stands up against bullies, right? Somebody who says, "This is bullshit. This doesn't really fly in my world," right? So there's a power in that, but you have to understand the power in it. And it's not an initiatory power. It's more of a power of reacting to the situation, not reacting, responding might be a better term, but it's like, this is not going to fly. This does not compute. And as a result of this, you're not going to get my flag. And so it's a really powerful placement for Mars, even though classically speaking, it's in a malefic. Now, if we go back to your chart,
what is a malefic?
So in astrology, like Mars in Cancer would be considered a malefic. Like it's not the best place for Mars. A benefic is when you have the sign. Let me see if you have a benefic in your chart. Moon in Taurus would be a benefic because the moon is exalted in Taurus, which is right over here. Very grounded, very practical, great placement for the moon. Guess what? Your moon is in the 8th house. You live in another country, right? The 8th house represents foreign travel, being open to higher ideas of consciousness. The moon is the home. You've relocated. Congratulations. You're living your chart, right? So, and then when I looked at your chart and the writing, the thing with the writing that really jumped out to me is Mercury. And it's Mercury in the 12th house, which is very private, right? It's like your private Idaho. And Mercury in Leo tends to be creative. Now, that is also a malefic as well, because Mercury is exalted in the sign of Aquarius, the opposite sign. But for you, it's interesting because you've taken this stance of fiction, nonfiction, like a metafiction. And generally, Leo tends to be a very, creative sign. Like it's a creative sign. So you've somehow managed to do this alchemy with this moon Mercury square. When you get into these squares, they're like dynamic tension. They're like a force in the chart that makes you grow, right? So we could have sort of a discussion about the demonic interpretation of something like that if you want to go down that alley. And then Jamie told me something really interesting. He said that somebody told you that your books would be discovered by people later on, right? Like somebody told you that. Is that correct?
I've had 3 or 4 like clairvoyants I don't really know get in contact with me to tell me like, exactly what you said. One guy said they'd be read in hundreds of years. I don't know what to make.
Well, so this gets into this whole idea of Vesta. And Vesta is one of the asteroids that I use when I look at astrology. And Vesta is the oldest. They're all feminine, right? And we get the word Vestal Virgin from Vesta, right? It's like the crone. It represents sort of your end of life period, like what it's going to look like, how it's going to feel. But we also get the word investment from Vesta. It's like what you want to invest in long term. And so when I see Vesta in a chart as it relates to a planet, like to me, that's really interesting because there's something ancient. There's something old about Vesta. So what you're doing with that Mercury in the 12th house, is you're tapping into the ancients, right? Because that's who your muses are the ancients. But it also, when he said that to me, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So people are going to discover his work many years from now. That's the investment that you're putting into the future. Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting about your Mercury is you have this Mercury-Neptune square. And I've talked about this to people that follow the show. I talk a lot about this. A lot of people that have Moon and Neptune squares, they have to deal with lying, right?
Yeah.
Lying. And they may not be liars. You may not be a liar. You're not a liar to me. You come across as very real and grounded. But some people that have Mercury-Neptune squares are liars. Like Trump has a Mercury-Neptune square. And he lies all the time. Yeah. He lies all the time. Now, what happens with people that aren't liars is that they have to be truthful with themselves. And they have to go inside. It's like, where am I lying inside of myself? It's a more internalization. It's more of an internalization of the lie. And so this Mercury-Neptune square can be an amazing teacher because it keeps you on the beam with the truth. Because you would know when you were lying, right? Whether it's through your art or whether it's through your interaction with another, you would know it. You would instantly know it, and you would have kind of at times even an involuntary response to it. So this is your own internal bullshit meter with this Mercury-Neptune square. But I also feel like anytime you get into these squares, especially with Neptune, they kind of open things up. They crack things open like a channel. So the potential for the creative function can come in. And so it's a really interesting dynamic, because a lot of times when you're writing fiction, you're lying. Right? Like you're telling a grand lie in some way, something that doesn't exist, but you're creating a world in which people believe in it. So there's this interesting dance when you go into the fiction world. So what you've done here is you've kind of created an interesting synergy between something that you've experienced probably in your own life, how to kind of hyper dramatize it, and create something that sounds and is legitimately real. People may not believe it, but it's legitimately real because you've gone through the layers and processed it. So you're able to kind of sift through things that feel fictional, that feel like they're an illusion, that feel like a lie, and you'll take what you need and you'll turn it into truth. And that's all a very 12th house experience. It's very private. It's like it's your own private Idaho. Right. So you're also at the 29th degree of Leo on the ascendant. So you have Regulus on your ascendant, which for many years has been the most royal of the royal stars. So there's something at that 29th degree of Leo that you're here to finish. It's the final degree. It's the anaretic degree. So this lifetime, if I were to read your chart, even knowing a little bit about you now, like this lifetime is your magnum opus. Like you need to do it in this lifetime. Because this is it, right? 1 degree over and you're into Virgo, which is a very, very different personification. And your first house is primarily Virgo. You have Pluto there, you have Uranus there, then you drop down into a little Libra. What happened in 2011 is Regulus changed signs. And most people don't know how profound this is. For thousands of years, we have been under sort of this rule of divine right, which is lined up with Regulus. Like the law of kings, the law of queens. In 2011, that changed. And it went into Virgo. And so we went into this shift from, this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump got elected. Because even though Trump is a 28 degree Leo rising, the common man could relate to Trump because of his gruff nature, how he talked. He was the exact opposite of Obama. He wasn't polished at all. Everything was kind of off the cuff, right? So that pivot in 2011 sort of sets the stage for Trump. But also what happens in 2011 is the whole DEI culture comes online. And then what happens is we have a bunch of Karen. We have a bunch of unqualified people that should be working at the DMV now in positions of power. It's sort of like at the beginning we're going to get the worst version of the people leading versus, the royal family or the royal bloodlines. They're going to substitute sort of the worst version of it because that's Virgo. It's like all of a sudden somebody who should be taking your registration is now a Supreme Court justice, who is a Virgo, by the way. Ketanji Brown Jackson is a Virgo. And so that's how it's starting. It's not how it's going to end, but that's how it's starting. But you have your ascendant right conjunct Regulus, which again, as an astrologer, that's a benefic. So this is like your magnum opus lifetime. There's a lot more to your chart here, but the thing that really jumped out at me was that Mars at 0 degrees, and you have a social responsibility too. You have the Sun Jupiter conjunction in the 11th house, which is connected to groups of people. So, and I know you have, your group of people that follow you, and you do your podcast, which people should probably hunt down and subscribe to immediately. You got a Discord. So you're kind of a leader. You have a responsibility for people in this lifetime. You have a grand trine that goes along with it right here. And that's kind of that's a power. Like when you get into a grand trine, it's like a superpower in the chart. You and I could talk more about this offline. I'm more than happy to go through this with you. But these are the things that jumped out at me. And it's that Mars at Cancer at 0 degrees. And one of the things that I hate is I hate bullies. Like I have a contempt for bullies. And I would think that you would have something very similar with that Mars. And because you have a Mars-Saturn square, you're not going to let Saturn, which is the ruler of hierarchies, systems in general, define who you are. You're going to fight against it, right? So you're a natural scrapper. Like that's who you are. And that's the flag you fly in the world. It's your own flag. Maybe you should get a flag made. If you could have a flag, what would it look like? Is he there? Oh, he beamed out. We're getting to the A1 sauce of the show, and he beamed out. And I wasn't even aware of it. I hope he comes back. All right. Let's go into the chat. Let's see what some of the comments are here. Let's see. Let's see. Olympic diver Greg Louganis to Bouquet Day. Do you remember when he hit his head on the diving board? Jesus. Is Greg Louganis an Aries? Let's see. Greg Louganis is an Aquarian. Of course he's an Aquarian. Interesting. Are we going to get Bruce back? There he is. Where did you drop out?
I had
Bluetooth mode.
Another little power glitch.
No, where did you drop out in my soliloquy?
The last thing I remember is lying and going into yourself internally, and there will be a lot of lies around you.
Yeah.
That's the last thing I remember.
Went through a lot more, so you should go back and watch the last 10 minutes.
I will. I will.
But you and I could go over this offline, but that's just kind of a Reader's Digest view. And I locked in on that Mars because we have the same Mars, even though we're born 6 years apart. And so there you go.
Phenomenal.
I got into this whole thing with Vesta and you being discovered years from now and communing with the ancients. And that's your source. The ancients are your source. They're your muses.
Wow. What when you're talking ancient, what are we talking here? Atlantis or further?
Oh, you can fill in the blanks. Ancients, like long-standing ancient beings, like watchers presiding over time. The recorders of everything. Right? They're your muses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a variation on something else I was told a number of years, several years ago, that I was, my incarnation was essentially that of a mythologist, and that I was an organizer for the Akashic records. I put things in.
that's very 12th house. That's totally 12th house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank goodness I've been able to make a living, because, I've put a lot of time into writing, and in terms of the philosophy of our time, which is largely return on investment, it's been materially, it's been a bit of a letdown. But as a person, I feel phenomenal, and I will never stop writing. It's more embedded in me than a crack addiction. I can't stop. Right. And
Yeah. Yeah.
this is the perfect writer's palace I've created up here. No property tax, no mortgage, no mortgage, no rent, no nothing. So, I mean, my two bills a month are Starlink and the lights, and that's it. And I should get a discount this month on the lights.
I'm tight with Elon. Let me put in a good word for you.
Okay. Are you really?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I wouldn't doubt that.
Just messing around. Where do we go from here? I feel like we're in second coming territory. Anarchy unleashed upon the world.
Al momento no, mi amor, porque la luz retornó. I was just having my lunch brought to me there.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Maybe we can sum up the future in 5 minutes. What do you think?
Sure.
Possible?
Yeah.
All right, give it a shot. Where are we headed?
Well, I think everything we're going through now is transformative, and it's, in a sense, it's a purge.
Yeah.
I think that the humans that occupy the planet in 100 or 200 years are going to have the fourth dimension mastered. We will no longer be bothered by our own thought creations or those things that live in the astral. Now, the New Age calls this, going to 5D. I think we're going to understand time and the purpose of life a lot better. I think the state of consciousness on this planet is going to be greatly elevated.
Yeah.
I think that there's been a tremendous amount of immigration to this planet, and immigration into the incarnational cycle. So brought from somewhere else and put into the Earth astral and incarnated here. And so I think what's going to happen is the general consciousness of the human race that inherits the Earth is going to be much more even. Where right now it's from the most primitive to the most advanced, the whole spectrum almost. And as I understand it, this is not normative at all. So I see the future as being very, very beautiful. And I see everything that's going on now as the process to get there. And getting through that process, I tell people on my podcast, take care of yourself. What would you do if this happened? Yeah. What would you do when you're going to Walmart and the Chinese ships haven't been unloaded for 6 months, and the packaged food you normally order is not there? I think, so that's my long term. My short term, like the next decade.
How about the next 3 years?
Brutal. Yeah. Non-stop brutality. Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian.
Yeah. I'd agree
just
with
non-stop.
You. Yeah, I would agree with you.
You want to be in a safe place where you know your neighbors. Latin culture is beautiful. Many countries you could come to. And there's another interesting thing, Robert, is there's a certain regionality to what's going on in the world. The most affected seems to be the first world. Now, that's because we're the most invested in the present system, and the present system's a rug that's being pulled out from under people's feet intentionally, and in some ways, I guess, just astrologically. But so take care of yourself in the short term. There's going to be a lot of people, and you can say this, I don't know how many times, and I don't know why, but people they don't want to hear it. It's a reality. They don't want to engage, but I think that's going to be very negative if they don't.
Yeah. So you and I are on the same page across the board, and that's a message I share with people as well. You got to take care of yourself. And another thing that I've added on to this is to treat people well. If they deserve it and they're respectful of being treated well, treat them well, and maintain a level of humanity. Like namaste, God is in you and God is in me. until
Yeah.
proven otherwise. You cross that line, we're having a different discussion.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Bruce, this has been beautiful. Feels like we're just getting started. I'd love to have you back on. And we can go deep into your work. We can go into what's happening currently. I think there's a lot of room to roam here. So if you enjoyed today's show, we'll have you back on.
Do you have a decent tablet for electronic publications?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna send you a couple. The well-reviewed book in Canada, you're going to enjoy it, and I'm going to send you a follow-up after that you're really going to enjoy. Okay. And you will be in the Bruce camp. You'll go, how is this guy not hit mainstream?
Oh, I'm sure.
Publication?
I will completely understand it on a certain level as well.
So let's do this again. Do I have your permission to download this and upload it to my Substack?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah.
All right, go enjoy your lunch, man. Bon appetit.
Thanks. All right, peace out.
All right, take care. Okay, that was Bruce McDonald. I hope you enjoyed it. The 2 hours, even with the intermittent disruption, absolutely flew by, and looking forward to having him back. It's an absolute treat to have a conversation with somebody who's based in the literary world, and because he's taken it to a whole nother level. I took a pit stop in college and it's like, I like it, maybe not for me, right? So I had a bit of a more meandering path, but I sure respect the hell out of it. And I'm just absolutely in respect for the commitment that it goes into being a writer. People don't know how hard it is to be a writer. You spend a lot of time alone, a lot of time with your own thoughts in the process of the work itself. It is really a very, very demanding yet fulfilling role if you can perform it and do it in a way with integrity and heart and courage, which is what our friend Bruce seems to be doing. We'll have him back on. In the meantime, we'll be back on Sunday night, and it'll be me solo this Sunday. And we're going to be talking about, unfortunately, last Sunday night, I didn't really get into a lot of eclipse talk because the discussion went into a very, very different direction. We're going to follow up on the eclipse on Sunday night. We'll look at the Charlie Kirk thing. And we got another eclipse coming on the 21st, and we'll make sure to get that in on Sunday night as well. So thank you all for being here. If you liked it, hit subscribe, hit the like button. Let's get the algorithm up. Drop a comment. And if you feel so inclined, you can buy me a cup of coffee for today's show if you enjoyed it. Go over to Locals. You can join Locals. I hang out there every now and then. Been trying to post some more, but this thing that kept me from going on my road trip sort of got in the way of that a little bit. But anything else? I think that's it. You know the drill. Take good care of yourselves. Treat each other well. God bless. Love you all. And we'll see you on Sunday night. Bye for now.